Grizzly bears, with their immense size and solitary nature, evoke both awe and fear. When threatened, they can become fierce protectors, unleashing overwhelming power. Attacks often result from startled reactions or instincts to defend, whether from hunger, territory, or offspring. These sudden, violent bursts serve as a reminder of the wild's unpredictability. Understanding grizzlies' behavior and respecting their space is crucial for safety. Recognizing their body language, such as signs of agitation or defensive postures, can help avoid confrontation. In the end, a balance of caution and respect ensures both human and bear can coexist peacefully in wild landscapes. In the remote foothills of eastern Wyoming in 2011, veteran hunter Carl Weston was tracking a rogue grizzly that had been terrorizing local cattle ranches for months. The Bighorn Mountain region had always been known for its wildlife, but this particular bear had become infamous across 3 counties. Historically, the area had seen its share of predator livestock conflicts since settlers first arrived in the 1800s, but nothing compared to the destruction this single animal had caused. The bear had destroyed livestock worth thousands of dollars across multiple properties, leaving mangled carcasses and broken fences in its wake. Locals spoke in hushed tones about the beast, a scarred, massive grizzly rumored to weigh over 1,200 pounds, with a distinctive white patch on its chest and a notched left ear. Some claimed it was unnaturally aggressive, perhaps due to an old hunting injury that had left it unable to hunt natural prey efficiently. Whatever the reason, Carlton had been hired to end the threat once and for all. A former wildlife officer with 27 years of hunting experience, Weston took the assignment seriously. For weeks, he studied the bear's patterns, following broken branches, paw prints nearly 14 inches across, and scattered remains of its kills. The ranchers needed someone with his expertise, as the bear had become increasingly bold, approaching ranch buildings and showing no fear of humans, a dangerous development that couldn't be ignored. On October 15th, after tracking the animal for 17 days, Weston rose before dawn and positioned himself downwind from what he believed was the bear's primary travel route between feeding grounds. The morning air carried a biting chill as he settled into position near a dense thicket bordering Harlow Creek. Armed with his trusted .45-70 lever-action rifle, he waited patiently as the first rays of sunlight filtered through the pines. The attack came without warning. Rather than approaching along the trail as expected, the massive grizzly had somehow circled behind him. Weston heard only a brief rustle before the bear exploded from the thick brush merely 30 yards away, charging at full speed. The hunter barely had time to shoulder his rifle before the animal closed half the distance between them. His first shot struck the bear's shoulder, a solid hit that would have dropped most animals instantly. The grizzly faltered momentarily, but continued its charge with renewed fury. Weston's second round punched into the bear's chest, yet incredibly, it kept coming. Time seemed to slow as the hunter worked the lever of his rifle with practiced precision, firing again and again as the distance between them vanished. The third and fourth shots hit the bear's upper body, drawing blood but failing to stop its momentum. At 20 feet, Weston could see the rage in the animal's eyes and smell its musty fur. His fifth shot struck the bear's neck, causing it to stumble slightly but not fall. The sixth round hit just below the jaw as the bear rose to its full height, towering nearly 9 feet tall on its hind legs. With the grizzly barely 10 feet away, Weston fired his seventh and final round directly into the bear's chest cavity. The massive animal crashed forward, sliding to a stop just short of the hunter's boots. The entire encounter had lasted less than 15 seconds. Drenched in sweat and spattered with blood, Weston sat down heavily on a nearby log, his hands shaking with adrenaline as he realized how close he had come to being torn apart. It took 30 minutes before he could steady himself enough to use his satellite phone to call the nearest ranch for assistance. When ranch hands Tobias Blackwood and Javier Montez arrived 2 hours later with a truck and winch, they were awestruck by the bear's size. Even experienced outdoorsmen, they admitted they had never seen anything like it. The animal required all 3 men and specialized equipment to load onto the vehicle. Later examination confirmed the bear weighed 1,153 pounds, making it one of the largest grizzlies ever documented in Wyoming. Its necropsy revealed old bullet fragments lodged in its hip and shoulder, likely explaining its inability to hunt natural prey and its resulting aggression toward livestock. Wildlife authorities estimated the bear was approximately 18 years old, with teeth worn from age and battle. Weston's encounter quickly became legendary across the region. Local newspaper editor Priscilla Hargrove wrote a front-page story titled "7 Rounds, the Monster of Bighorn County," which was picked up by outdoor publications. Ranch owner Frederick Hollister presented Weston with a custom knife made from the bear's claw as a token of appreciation for ending the threat to local livelihoods. In the years that followed, Carlton occasionally gave talks at hunting safety courses about the importance of proper caliber selection and shot placement. He emphasized that his survival had been as much about preparation and training as it was about luck. The mounted bear eventually found a home in the county museum, where it continued to draw visitors curious about the legendary animal that required 7 rounds to bring down. Weston himself never hunted bear again, claiming that after looking into the eyes of such a magnificent creature at point-blank range, something in him had changed. He continued to hunt deer and elk, but focused more on conservation work in his later years. The experience had given him a profound respect for the wilderness that still existed in even the most settled parts of Wyoming, and a first-hand understanding of humanity's tenuous position in the natural order. In the picturesque outskirts of Banff, Alberta, Canada, in 2006, the Thornbridge family returned from their week-long summer vacation to find their mountain retreat in shocking disarray. The property, nestled among towering pines a few miles from the edge of protected wilderness, had been in Maxwell Thornbridge's family for generations. The area had long served as a critical wildlife corridor, with human settlements gradually encroaching on natural habitats over the decades. The Thornbridges, Maxwell, his wife Elaine, and their teenage children Harper and Reed, had spent 7 days visiting relatives in Vancouver, leaving their home securely locked. Upon arrival, they immediately noticed something was terribly wrong. The kitchen window had been shattered, glass fragments scattered across the countertop and floor. Inside, the destruction was extensive. Furniture overturned, upholstery shredded, and food containers torn apart and emptied. Maxwell initially suspected vandals or burglars, but as they cautiously moved through the first floor, distinct animal droppings and claw marks on the wooden door frames suggested a different culprit. The family proceeded carefully, documenting the damage for insurance purposes while keeping their voices low. The children stayed close to their mother as Maxwell investigated further. The strange, musky odor grew stronger near the basement door. Maxwell approached it carefully, noticing deep scratches in the wood. Placing his ear against the door, he froze. Unmistakable sounds of movement came from below. Something large was moving around in their basement. Maxwell whispered for his family to return to their vehicle immediately while he called the local wildlife authorities. Elaine ushered the children outside, but 16-year-old Reed insisted on staying with his father. Against better judgment, Maxwell allowed him to remain in the living room while he contacted emergency services. The dispatcher advised them to evacuate completely and wait for rangers to arrive, warning that a cornered wild animal could be extremely dangerous. As Maxwell ended the call, a tremendous crash echoed from behind the basement door, followed by the splintering of wood. Concerned the animal might break through before help arrived, Maxwell decided to check if the door was properly secured. This critical error in judgment nearly cost him his life. When Maxwell turned the handle to test the lock, the door burst open with explosive force. A medium-sized black bear, approximately 300 pounds and frenzied from captivity, charged through the opening. Disoriented and terrified after days trapped in the dark basement, the bear perceived Maxwell as a threat. Before he could react, the animal slammed into him, sending him tumbling backward down the basement stairs. Reed shouted from the living room, drawing the bear's attention momentarily. This gave Maxwell precious seconds to scramble behind an overturned workbench. The bear, confused by the multiple human scents and overwhelmed by its sudden freedom, paced aggressively at the bottom of the stairs, occasionally charging at Maxwell's makeshift barrier. From his defensive position, Maxwell grabbed a broomstick to keep the animal at bay while shouting instructions to his son. Reed, displaying remarkable composure, called emergency services again, emphasizing the dire situation while retreating to the relative safety of the kitchen. For nearly 20 harrowing minutes, Maxwell defended himself with the broomstick, receiving several glancing blows from the bear's powerful paws. Each time the animal charged, Maxwell jabbed at its sensitive nose, temporarily driving it back, but enraging it further. During one particularly aggressive assault, the bear's claws tore through Maxwell's jacket and into his side, leaving deep lacerations. Park rangers, Helena Yoshida and Bernard Clements, arrived with remarkable speed, entering through the front door with tranquilizer equipment. The bear, hearing new threats from above, renewed its aggression against Maxwell. Ranger Yoshida fired a tranquilizer dart, striking the bear's hindquarters. The animal roared and spun around, charging up the stairs toward the Rangers. Ranger Clements deployed bear spray, creating a defensive chemical barrier while Yoshida reloaded. The bear hesitated, affected by the irritating spray, giving Yoshida the opportunity to fire a second dart. Within minutes, the tranquilizer took effect, and the bear collapsed in the narrow hallway between the basement and kitchen. Medical technicians arrived shortly afterward, finding Maxwell severely injured with 3 broken ribs, a fractured wrist, and deep claw wounds across his torso and arms. The emergency team stabilized him before transport to a local hospital where he would spend 11 days recovering. Wildlife authorities later determined the black bear, a 5-year-old male, had likely been attracted to the property by improperly stored garbage before the family's departure. After breaking through the kitchen window, it had eventually found its way to the basement, where the door had swung shut behind it. Trapped for approximately 6 days without adequate food or water, the animal had become increasingly desperate and destructive. The bear was relocated deep into backcountry territory, over 70 miles from human settlements after veterinary examination. Conservation Officer Priya Mehta explained that the bear's behavior was not predatory, but rather panic-driven, a desperate animal seeking escape rather than confrontation. The Thornbridge home required extensive repairs, totaling nearly $42,000. Insurance covered most of the damage, but the psychological impact proved far more lasting. Elaine insisted on installing advanced security systems and metal shutters on all ground floor windows. The children experienced nightmares for months following the incident, with Reed requiring counseling to process the trauma of nearly witnessing his father's death. Maxwell recovered physically, but developed a heightened awareness of wildlife proximity that bordered on paranoia. The basement was completely renovated, with the wooden door replaced by a reinforced metal security door. Despite these precautions, the family never quite felt safe in their home again. Every unexplained sound in the night brought renewed anxiety. The incident prompted local authorities to launch an educational campaign about proper food storage and waste management in wildlife-adjacent communities. The Thornbridge case was frequently cited in these materials as a sobering reminder that wilderness didn't always stay outside the front door. Their experience demonstrated how quickly an ordinary situation could transform into a life-threatening encounter when human settlements intersected with wild animal territories. In the remote village of Verkhoyansky, nestled at the edge of Siberia's vast wilderness, in 1998, 3 teenage boys ventured along a forest trail for an afternoon of exploration. The village, established in the mid-19th century by fur trappers and later expanded during industrial development, had always maintained an uneasy relationship with the surrounding taiga forest. Local history recounted numerous encounters with wildlife, though serious incidents had been rare in recent decades, as human activity pushed animals deeper into shrinking wilderness areas. Dmitry Volkov, Pyotr Sokolov, and Nikolai Baranov, all aged 16, had grown up together in the tight-knit community of barely 400 residents. Despite frequent warnings from elders about respecting wilderness boundaries, the boys had developed a comfortable familiarity with the forest's edge. That spring afternoon, they traveled along an established path approximately 2 kilometers from the village outskirts, searching for a rumored abandoned weather station. The weather that day had been unusually warm for early May, with temperatures reaching 15 degrees Celsius, drawing many wildlife species out of winter hibernation and into active foraging. The boys had been noisy during their hike, carelessly snapping branches and throwing stones at trees, behavior that would later be cited as potentially attracting attention from predators. Around 3 o'clock, as they crossed into a less frequently traversed section of forest, Pyotr spotted movement in the dense underbrush approximately 30 meters ahead. Before he could alert the others, a massive Ussuri brown bear, sometimes called the Russian Grizzly, emerged from between 2 fallen logs. The animal, later estimated by wildlife officials to weigh nearly 800 pounds, stood motionless, assessing the intruders in its territory. The boys froze in terror as survival instincts conflicted with their panic. Nikolai, positioned closest to the bear, made the fatal decision to run. Wildlife experts would later explain that this triggered the bear's predatory chase response. The massive animal charged forward with surprising speed, covering the distance in seconds. Dmitry and Pyotr scattered in opposite directions as Nikolai sprinted toward a clearing that might have offered visibility to the village. The bear overtook Nikolai within 60 meters, striking him from behind with enough force to throw him several feet forward. What happened next occurred largely out of sight of the other boys, though Pyotr, having scrambled up an embankment, witnessed portions of the attack through dense foliage. The bear's assault was brief but catastrophic, causing massive traumatic injuries. Dmitry had fled in the direction of the village, but became disoriented in the thick forest. Pyotr, having witnessed the attack's beginning, had retreated in the opposite direction. In his panic, he fell down a steep ravine, suffering a compound fracture to his left leg and multiple lacerations. Despite excruciating pain, he managed to drag himself toward a dilapidated fence, marking an old boundary between village hunting grounds and protected forest. The fence provided minimal protection, but its weathered wooden posts allowed Pyotr to pull himself upright. Using a broken branch as a makeshift crutch and fighting against shock and blood loss, he moved painfully along the fence line. Nearly 2 hours after the attack, he located an area where cell reception was strong enough to make an emergency call to the village. Retired hunter Pavel Korznikov was passing near the forest edge on his tractor when he heard faint cries for help. Following the sounds, he discovered Pyotr collapsed against the fence, barely conscious from blood loss and exposure. Korznikov immediately transported the injured teenager to the village clinic while alerting local authorities about the attack and Nikolai's unknown status. A search party consisting of village men with hunting experience mobilized within the hour, equipped with rifles and tracking dogs. Led by veteran tracker Yuri Petrov, they located Nikolai's body shortly before dusk. The scene confirmed their worst fears. The teenager had not survived the bear's attack. Dmitry was found several hours later, hiding in a hollow log approximately 1 kilometer from the attack site, physically unharmed but suffering from severe psychological trauma. Wildlife authorities from the regional capital arrived the following day to investigate. Conservation officer Arkady Morozov confirmed through paw print measurements and attack patterns that the animal had been an adult male Ussuri brown bear, likely recently emerged from hibernation and potentially undernourished. Evidence suggested the bear had been startled by the teen's presence rather than stalking them as prey, but had responded with lethal force when Nikolai fled. Pyotr underwent multiple surgeries at the regional hospital, eventually recovering from his physical injuries, though requiring extensive rehabilitation for his shattered leg. Psychological recovery proved more challenging, as he experienced severe post-traumatic stress disorder that prevented him from venturing near forested areas for years afterward. The village held a funeral for Nikolai 5 days after the attack. The tragedy profoundly affected the small community, with many families imposing strict restrictions on children's activities outside village boundaries. Local schools implemented enhanced wildlife safety education, emphasizing proper behavior during animal encounters. Regional authorities organized a controlled hunt for the bear, though it was never definitively located. Trail cameras installed after the incident captured images of 3 different adult male bears in the vicinity, suggesting the area supported more predators than previously understood. The village council subsequently established a more robust perimeter fence around populated areas and instituted regular patrols during spring and summer months. The incident received media attention, highlighting the increasing frequency of human-wildlife conflicts in remote regions as development continued to encroach on natural habitats. For the residents of Verkhoyansky, the attack served as a somber reminder of their precarious coexistence with the wilderness, a relationship balanced between necessity and danger, where a moment's carelessness could result in tragedy. In the frigid waters surrounding Kodiak Island, Alaska, in 1979, commercial fisherman Theodore Reinhardt encountered a situation so extraordinary that it would be recounted in maritime folklore for decades. Kodiak, located in the northern Gulf of Alaska, had been home to indigenous Alutiiq people for thousands of years before Russian colonization in the 18th century. Named for its massive brown bears, the largest subspecies of grizzly in the world, Kodiak's wilderness represented one of North America's last truly wild frontiers. Reinhardt, a 37-year-old third-generation fisherman of German Alutiiq descent, had been working these waters since adolescence. On that September morning, he set out alone in his 18-foot skiff, the Mariner's Dream, to check his crab pots in Kuprianov Strait, a narrow channel separating Kodiak from neighboring Afognak Island. The weather had been unusually clear with light winds, perfect conditions for the small vessel. The crossing between islands normally took approximately 40 minutes. Reinhardt had completed this journey hundreds of times throughout his career, familiar with every current and hidden reef. He had just passed the halfway point when he noticed something unusual in the water about 200 yards ahead. A dark object moving deliberately against the current. Initially, Reinhardt assumed it was a sea lion or perhaps a small whale, common sights in these productive waters. However, as the distance closed, he realized with astonishment that he was observing a massive Kodiak bear swimming across the channel. While bears occasionally swam between islands, witnessing one this far from shore was extremely rare. The animal appeared to be a mature male, its wet fur plastered against a frame that likely exceeded 1,100 pounds on land. Wildlife biologists would later speculate that unusually strong tidal currents had likely pulled the bear off course during what should have been a routine crossing at a narrower point of the strait. By the time Reinhardt encountered it, the animal had been swimming for possibly several hours and showed signs of exhaustion. Reinhardt reduced his engine speed and maintained distance, intending to observe the magnificent creature without disturbing its journey. He had been taught from childhood to respect the apex predators that shared the Kodiak archipelago. However, the situation rapidly deteriorated when the bear altered course, swimming directly toward the small boat. Whether drawn by curiosity, desperation for rest, or confusion due to exhaustion, remained unknown. What became immediately clear was the danger presented by an exhausted 1,000-pound predator attempting to board a vessel barely twice its length. Reinhardt increased throttle to create distance, but the bear pursued with surprising speed despite its fatigue. Within minutes, the animal reached the skiff's port side. Reinhardt quickly maneuvered to prevent the bear from gaining a foothold, but the creature's massive front paws gripped the gunwale. The small boat tilted dangerously under the sudden shift in weight. In a desperate attempt to counterbalance, Reinhardt cut the engine and shifted the skiff to starboard. hoping to regain control. But the bear's relentless efforts caused the vessel to capsize entirely. Thrown into 43-degree water, Reinhardt surfaced to find himself separated from the overturned skiff by about 15 feet, with the massive bear between them. In the ensuing confusion, the panicked animal, struggling to stay afloat, perceived Reinhardt's thrashing as a threat. It lunged toward him, slashing out with powerful paws in what wildlife experts would later describe as defensive behavior rather than predatory. Fighting hypothermia in the frigid water, Reinhardt spotted a floating wooden oar that had been dislodged from his vessel. As the bear approached again, he struck it repeatedly across the sensitive nose area. After several blows, the disoriented animal swam away, heading roughly toward Afognak Island, though clearly struggling against both the current and its exhaustion. Reinhardt, nearing hypothermia after nearly 20 minutes in the water, managed to reach his overturned skiff. Though unable to right the boat, he clung to the exposed hull for flotation. The emergency positioning beacon on his life vest had activated upon immersion, alerting Coast Guard authorities to his location. Nearly an hour later, the commercial fishing vessel, Northern Light, captained by Josephine Holloway, spotted the overturned skiff while returning from halibut grounds. Holloway and her crew rescued the severely hypothermic Reinhardt, administering emergency first aid and radioing for medical evacuation. Despite his core body temperature dropping to dangerous levels, Reinhardt survived, though with moderate lacerations to his left arm and shoulder from the bear's claws. The fate of the bear remained unknown. Search flights the following day found no sign of the animal along nearby shorelines. Marine biologists from the University of Alaska theorized that, given its exhaustion and the distance remaining to shore, the bear likely drowned, though its remarkable swimming endurance meant survival was still a possibility. Reinhardt's extraordinary encounter quickly spread through Kodiak's tight-knit fishing community. Initially met with skepticism, his account gained credibility when distinct claw marks matching Kodiak bear patterns were found on the recovered skiff. Maritime authorities officially documented the incident in their quarterly safety bulletin, creating the first record of a bear vessel interaction in open Alaskan waters. After 6 weeks of recovery, Reinhardt returned to fishing, but never again in a vessel smaller than 30 feet. He installed additional safety equipment and modified his routes to avoid known bear crossing points between islands. His experience led the Kodiak Fishermen's Association to include wildlife encounter protocols in their safety training programs. The incident became locally famous, eventually featured in Alaska Geographic magazine under the headline, "When Wilderness Swims." For Kodiak residents, Reinhardt's survival story served as a powerful reminder. Even on their remote island, the line between human domain and wilderness remained permeable and uncertain. At sea, the massive predators that gave the island its fearsome reputation could suddenly transform from distant wildlife into immediate, life-threatening reality. In the mist-shrouded wilderness, 2017, a seasoned hiking group encountered the lethal unpredictability of a landscape known for its abundant wildlife. The region, often called a Serengeti for its diverse animal population, had been established as protected territory decades earlier, allowing natural predator-prey relationships to recover after near eradication in the early 20th century. The area's large carnivore population had slowly rebounded, a conservation success that occasionally resulted in dangerous human encounters. The hiking party consisted of 5 experienced outdoor enthusiasts: group leader Harrison Montgomery, wildlife photographer Camilla Nakamura, retired geology professor Edmund Webster, emergency room physician Alexandra Kostopoulos, and Forest Service volunteer Jeremiah Blackwell. All had completed advanced wilderness training and had previously hiked in bear country without incident. Their planned route traversed an established trail through a remote valley, requiring permits due to its isolated nature. The group had departed from the trailhead shortly after sunrise, hoping to reach their designated camping area by mid-afternoon. Weather conditions initially seemed favorable, with cool temperatures and a light breeze, ideal for the 8-mile hike ahead. However, as they descended into the valley at approximately 8:45 a.m., they encountered an unusual weather phenomenon common to the region, a dense ground fog that reduced visibility to less than 20 feet. Montgomery, with 15 years of backcountry experience, called a brief conference. Standard procedure recommended waiting for the fog to lift rather than continuing with limited visibility in predator territory. However, weather reports via satellite phone indicated the condition might persist throughout the day. After discussion, the group decided to proceed cautiously, maintaining tight formation and making noise consistently to alert wildlife to their presence. For 40 minutes, they navigated through the ethereal landscape, regularly calling out and striking their trekking poles against trees to announce their presence. As they crossed a sloping meadow approximately 4 miles from the trailhead, the fog briefly thinned, revealing ghostly silhouettes of grazing elk in the distance. The group paused to observe and photograph the animals, temporarily lowering their guard and noise level. Montgomery, walking point position approximately 10 feet ahead of the others, crossed over a slight rise in the terrain. What happened next occurred with shocking speed. A massive grizzly bear, later estimated by wildlife experts to weigh approximately 600 pounds, erupted from the fog less than 15 feet from Montgomery's position. The animal had been feeding on an elk carcass concealed by tall grass, a kill it was aggressively defending. The group's noise approach had actually worsened the situation. Rather than giving the bear an opportunity to retreat unconfronted, they had effectively cornered it at its food source. The grizzly charged instantly, covering the short distance to Montgomery before he could deploy his bear spray. The initial impact knocked him backward, and the bear's powerful jaws clamped onto his upper thigh, inflicting catastrophic damage to the femoral artery. The remaining hikers reacted with textbook precision despite their horror. Dr. Kostopoulos immediately deployed bear spray, creating a defensive chemical cloud while shouting commands to the others. Blackwell activated his emergency satellite beacon while Nakamura and Webster hastily retreated several yards, creating escape space for the animal. The bear released Montgomery and vanished into the fog as quickly as it had appeared. The entire attack lasted approximately 12 seconds, but the damage was severe. Montgomery lay unconscious and rapidly exsanguinating from his leg wound. Dr. Kostopoulos applied immediate pressure to the femoral artery while directing the others to establish a perimeter with additional bear spray ready. Despite Dr. Kostopoulos' medical intervention, Montgomery's injuries proved fatal within minutes. The femoral artery damage too extensive for field treatment. The remaining hikers maintained defensive positions around their fallen companion, deeply shaken but disciplined in following emergency protocols. The bear, having established territorial dominance, did not return, though movement could be heard periodically in the surrounding fog. Emergency response, alerted by the satellite beacon, arrived via helicopter approximately 57 minutes after the attack. Poor visibility required the aircraft to land nearly half a mile from the group's position. Ranger Teresa Callahan led a 4-person armed response team through the fog, locating the hikers through radio communication. Montgomery's body was evacuated, while the remaining hikers were escorted to safety. Subsequent investigation revealed the grizzly had killed an elk approximately 18 hours before the encounter and had been guarding its cache, behavior consistent with natural feeding patterns rather than predatory aggression toward humans. Wildlife biologists identified the animal through DNA samples as a 12-year-old male with no previous history of human conflict. The tragedy sparked renewed debate about wilderness management policies. Some activists called for increased trail closures during fog conditions, while others emphasized that Montgomery's group had followed most recommended protocols. Authorities ultimately implemented enhanced warning systems at trailheads regarding weather conditions and increased mandatory distances from established trails during periods of reduced visibility. For the survivors, the psychological impact proved significant. Dr. Kostopoulos took extended leave from her medical practice, struggling with dreams of patients she couldn't save. Nakamura's subsequent photography exhibition, Threshold, Light and Shadow in Wild Places, explored themes of beauty and danger existing simultaneously. Webster incorporated the experience into his university lectures, emphasizing that wilderness knowledge must include accepting its inherent risks. Jeremiah Blackwell, perhaps most affected, left his volunteer position with the Forest Service and became an advocate for enhanced emergency communication systems in wilderness areas. His testimony before a governmental subcommittee on park safety helped secure funding for an expanded network of emergency beacons throughout backcountry trails. The incident served as a somber reminder to wilderness enthusiasts that in wild places, fog wasn't just weather, it was a deadly curtain that could hide death just a few steps away. Despite all human precautions and experience, wild places remain truly wild, operating under ancient rules where humans were neither apex predator nor privileged visitor, but simply another species moving through dangerous terrain. In the rugged backcountry of Colorado, 1995, a volunteer search and rescue team experienced a harrowing confrontation that would forever change wilderness emergency protocols. The area, characterized by steep ravines and dense pine forests, had historically been prime grizzly habitat before the species' extirpation in the 1950s. However, unconfirmed sightings in recent years had suggested possible natural recolonization from neighboring regions, reports largely dismissed by wildlife authorities as mistaken black bear identifications. The 5-person team had been dispatched to locate Charles and Marianne Hendrickson, experienced hikers from Minnesota, who had failed to return from a 3-day trek in the park's remote northwestern section. The search team consisted of team leader Bradford Wellington, a 20-year veteran of mountain rescues, medical technician Veronica Sandoval, communications specialist Timothy Zhao, wilderness guide Ophelia Jenkins, and Nathaniel Hollister, a former park ranger with extensive tracking experience. All had completed advanced wilderness first aid training and participated in numerous previous rescues in similar terrain. Their search began at the trailhead, following the Hendricksons' registered route plan. They maintained regular radio contact with base operations as they ascended beyond the tree line, methodically checking potential emergency campsites and shelter locations. After 8 hours of searching, Hollister discovered boot prints matching the missing hiker's pattern, descending off-trail toward a densely forested drainage, possibly indicating an attempt to seek shelter from the previous day's thunderstorms. Following this promising lead, the team descended into the ravine as afternoon shadows lengthened across the landscape. At approximately 5:40 p.m., they entered a small clearing surrounded by lodgepole pines and discovered the Hendricksons' tent, damaged but intact, with supplies scattered nearby. Evidence suggested a hasty departure rather than animal damage, raising hopes the hikers might be found alive. Wellington instructed the team to establish a perimeter and begin methodical search patterns radiating from the campsite. Hollister and Sandoval took the northern quadrant, moving carefully through thick underbrush while calling the missing hikers' names. Approximately 200 yards from camp, they discovered fresh bear scat containing fabric scraps, an ominous sign that immediately elevated their concern. Hollister radioed Wellington with this development, and the team regrouped to reassess. While discussing next steps, they heard rustling in the vegetation approximately 30 yards east of their position. Initially hoping it might be the missing hikers, they were instead confronted by a massive grizzly bear emerging from behind a fallen tree. Later analysis of paw prints and witness descriptions confirmed what seemed impossible. A mature male grizzly, estimated at 650 pounds, had indeed recolonized this area. The animal likely protecting a nearby food cache containing the hikers' remains, charged without warning. Hollister, positioned closest to the animal's approach, had no time to deploy defense measures before the bear struck him with tremendous force, knocking him into a rocky outcropping and immediately mauling his torso and legs. Wellington and Jenkins simultaneously deployed bear spray, creating a defensive chemical cloud that temporarily drove the animal back. Zhao activated emergency protocols via radio, while Sandoval pulled medical supplies from her pack. The team dragged the severely injured Hollister toward a natural stone formation that offered partial protection on 3 sides. The bear, briefly disoriented by the pepper spray, retreated approximately 50 yards before circling back. Jenkins deployed a marine flare, creating both a visual and auditory deterrent that again temporarily repelled the animal. For nearly 45 minutes, the team alternated between treating Hollister's massive injuries and defending their position as the bear made repeated approach attempts from different angles. Sandoval's emergency medical training proved critical. Despite limited supplies, she managed to control Hollister's arterial bleeding and stabilize his condition enough to prevent immediate death. Wellington maintained constant communication with park headquarters, where rangers were organizing an armed response team and helicopter evacuation. As darkness approached, the bear's persistence increased. During one particularly aggressive charge, the animal came within 6 feet of the group before Jenkins struck it directly in the face with her aluminum trekking pole, momentarily stunning it. Wellington followed with a direct blast of bear spray to the animal's eyes and nasal passages, finally convincing it to abandon the confrontation. Rescue helicopters arrived 20 minutes later, using spotlights to locate the team. 2 ranger paramedics rappelled from the aircraft, while their colleagues provided armed security against potential bear return. Hollister, barely conscious and having lost dangerous amounts of blood, was evacuated first, followed by the remaining team members. At Denver Medical Center, surgeons worked for 11 hours to repair Hollister's extensive injuries, including compound fractures to both legs, severe lacerations across his torso and face, and internal organ damage. Though he survived, his recovery required 14 additional surgeries over 2 years, leaving him with permanent mobility limitations and extensive scarring. The fate of the Hendricksons was confirmed 3 days later when a heavily armed recovery team located their remains approximately a quarter mile from their campsite. Evidence indicated they had been killed by the same bear, likely after accidentally encountering it while hiking off trail. The incident fundamentally changed wildlife management policies. DNA analysis of hair samples collected at the attack site confirmed the animal was indeed a grizzly bear, forcing wildlife authorities to acknowledge natural recolonization had occurred. Mandatory bear canisters were implemented for all backcountry camping, ranger patrols in remote areas were expanded, and warning signage was installed at all trailheads. For the surviving rescue team members, the psychological impact proved as lasting as Hollister's physical injuries. Sandoval eventually left emergency medicine to become a wildlife conservation educator. Jenkins incorporated her experience into wilderness safety courses she developed for outdoor leadership programs. Wellington continued search and rescue work, but campaigned tirelessly for enhanced communication systems and weapon authorizations for rescue teams in predator territories. Later, the attack was extensively documented in a bestseller film called Return of the Silvertip, bringing attention to grizzly recolonization throughout the Rocky Mountain corridor. Despite ongoing debates about predator management, most biologists celebrated the bear's return as a sign of ecological recovery, while acknowledging the complex challenges of human-wildlife coexistence in increasingly shared landscapes. The incident became a case study in wildlife management courses nationwide, examining how human wilderness activity intersects with natural predator recovery. For Colorado residents, the confirmation of Grizzly's return transformed their relationship with wild spaces, adding both ecological significance and sobering reality to the understanding that wilderness remained truly wild, even in places where civilization seemed to have tamed the landscape.